This is Land of Havilah, 2 Kings 4a. On with the exploits of Elisha. Verse 1. Now a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets cried out to Elisha, saying, Your servant, my husband, is dead. You know that your servant feared Yahweh. Now the creditor has come to take for himself my 2 children to be slaves. Comment: A nameless prophet passed away. We didn't know him, but Elisha did, because she said, You know that your servant feared Yahweh. The man left a wife and 2 children, boys that are old enough to help out around the house a little bit, as we find out coming up. Either her husband left her in debt or she fell into it after he died. She's distraught because she can't pay. She has nothing to give except her 2 sons as slaves. Her husband feared Yahweh, so she's hoping Yahweh will do something. So she's calling on Elisha, crying out to him, as it says. Verse 2. Elisha said to her, What should I do for you? Tell me, what do you have in the house? She said, Your servant has nothing in the house except a pot of oil. Then he said, Go, borrow empty containers from all of your neighbors. Don't borrow just a few containers. Go in and shut the door on you and on your sons, and pour oil into all those containers and set aside those which are full. So she went from him and shut the door on herself and on her sons. They brought the containers to her, and she poured oil. When the containers were full, she said to her son, Bring me another container. He said to her, There isn't another container. Then the oil stopped flowing. Then she came and told the man of God. He said, Go, sell the oil and pay your debt, and you and your sons live on the rest. Comment: The widow had nothing but a container of oil in the house. Olive oil, no doubt, which was a staple product of the time for food, for making bread, and for providing lamplight. Elisha made clear that she would pour oil and that it would keep coming, but he didn't say how long and how much. Would it be just enough to pay the debt? That would be a good guess, but maybe Yahweh would provide more. It's an important question because she could have believed for a lot or a little. She could have collected jars just from her immediate neighbors or more from everyone around. He said, quote, Don't borrow just a few, end quote. She was limited only by her concept of Yahweh and by the size of her house, because Elisha told her to close the doors on herself and her children before she started pouring, so obviously she couldn't use any more containers than what would fit in the house. We'd like to have been there with her sons that were helping as she said, Bring me another and another, just to hear what they were saying and to see the expression on their faces as that oil kept coming. But we know she was thrilled with Yahweh's supply. No more poverty, no more debt, no more worrying about losing her sons. In the end, we find she collected enough containers to hold enough oil to pay the debt, plus more to live on, so she believed pretty well in collecting enough jars. God promises to fill our needs. Quote, My God will supply every need of yours according to his riches in glory in Christ Jesus. Philippians 4:19. Note that the promise isn't that he'll make us rich, it's that he'll supply all our needs according to his riches. In other words, he's good for it. He's good for our needs. If a parent is rich, he's capable of meeting his child's needs, but he won't hand those riches over to the child until the fullness of time. We should remember that Yahweh went to great lengths to bring Israel into the Promised Land. He described it 20 times as a land flowing with milk and honey, Exodus 3:8 and 19 other places. It might take us a while to get there, as it took Israel, but we will get there, and much more quickly with trust and obedience, Numbers 14:23. But it takes more than believing from the sitting position. The woman had to go out and collect jars. So whatever we do to support ourselves, we should jump in with both feet, expecting Yahweh to give the supply as he guides us in how to go about it. Everything started in verse 1 with her husband's fear of Yahweh, and clearly she believed as well. So, is poverty a sign of sin and unbelief? No. If we point out that Yahweh brought Israel into the Promised Land, we should also point out that beforehand he left them as slaves in Egypt for 400 years. Jesus was poor. He had no home, Matthew 8:20, but certainly God supplied him with what he needed, as he promises to supply our needs. So what was the point of all this to the woman? That she was able to pay off her debt and be financially secure? Yes, but not so much. The point was that she kept her sons. May Yahweh supply whatever it takes that we don't lose our sons and daughters to Satan. He's the only creditor heartless enough to take them from us. Now on to an encounter with a different woman, verse 8. One day Elisha went to Shunem, where there was a prominent woman, and she persuaded him to eat bread. So it was that as often as he passed by, he turned in there to eat bread. Comment: Notice the woman's hospitality to the man of God. Elisha was passing by, and she persuaded him to eat bread. It was her idea. She was the one who reached out, and she insisted on keeping it up because as often as he passed by, he turned in to eat. Verse 9. She said to her husband, "See now, I perceive that this is a holy man of God who passes by us continually. Please let's make a little room on the roof. Let's set a bed, a table, a chair, and a lampstand for him there. When he comes to us, he can stay there." Comment: The woman in Shunem is somewhat the opposite of the prophet's widow. She's married and she's well supplied with everything she needs, as she'll say coming up. We should file this information away because her fortunes will change 4 chapters from now. But for now, she's comfortable. She noticed that Elisha kept passing through, so she constructed a guest room on her roof. She did so in faith, knowing that Elisha was a servant of God. Quote, "I perceive that this is a holy man of God." End quote. Verse 11. One day he came there, and he went to the room and lay there. He said to Gehazi, his servant, "Call this Shunammite." When he had called her, she stood before him. Comment: As he was lying on the bed, he got the idea that he should do something for the woman because she's reached out and done so much for him. Sometimes God brings to mind our best ideas when we're just chilling out. That's the first mention of Elisha's servant Gehazi. Elisha's talking to him as we go to verse 13. He said to him, "Say now to her, Behold, you have cared for us with all this care. What is to be done for you? Would you like to be spoken for to the king or to the captain of the army?" She answered, "I dwell among my own people." Comment: That saying, "I dwell among my own people," indicates that she's well situated in family and community with plenty of people to count on. There's nothing a king or captain of the army can add to her comfort. She's like the person that's hard to shop for because she already has everything. But Elisha still wants to do something for her as we go to verse 14. He said, "What then is to be done for her?" Gehazi answered, "Most certainly she has no son, and her husband is old." He said, "Call her." When he had called her, she stood in the door. He said, "At this season, when the time comes around, you will embrace a son." She said, "No, my lord, you man of God, do not lie to your servant." Comment: She said, "Do not lie to your servant." This isn't necessarily a statement of unbelief. As she explains later, what she means by this is, "Don't give me false hope," or "Don't mislead me," or "You better not be lying to me because now you've got me all stirred up." Verse 17. The woman conceived and bore a son at that season when the time came around, as Elisha had said to her. Comment: Yahweh strikes again. Promises made, promises kept, rewards given. A son is born. Her story continues at landofhavilah.net, 2 Kings 4b, and then later on in chapter 8 when we find her in a predicament. 2 Kings 4b is next. This is the map of 2 Kings 4a. This is the site of present-day Shunem in the Jezreel Valley. 2 Kings 4b is next.